So here, right now, is our battleground. We believe in autonomy. We believe in fiscal responsibility. We believe in constitutionally limited government. We believe in capitalism. But this is not enough. To win this war, we must show a reverence and a deference to a supreme being, a God who appeals to the good in all of us. That is what we learned at the Restoring Honor rally. Now, we were energized by the number of people at that rally. At least 500,000 people from all over the world were in attendance. And we met people from Connecticut, Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, and Texas, just within the small area that we had staked out. The sentiment was the same for everyone there, that our country was not going on the right direction, and that we needed to restore America back to its roots. After the rally, my wife and I returned to the hotel. Later that evening, we went to a well-known restaurant in Washington, D.C. It was crowded, so my wife and I sauntered up to the bar to get a drink while we waited for our reservations. Next to my wife, a gray-haired, slightly round man, let's call him Puffy Steve. I'm not being derogatory, just descriptive. Puffy Steve had ordered an interesting flight of drinks in small wine glasses, and my wife asked him what it was. Well, Puffy Steve, with his haughty tone in his voice, indicated that it was some sort of Pinot Noir with a highfalutin name. And then he said something amazing. He stated that he and his wife had just left another restaurant where there were a bunch of right-wing Glenn Beck nut jobs. My wife looked at him, smiled, and calmly said, "We were at the rally." Well, Puffy Steve looked at her, then he looked at me, and he said, "Oh, you were at the Al Sharpton rally." Now, this is where things got interesting. I looked at him in the eyes and said, "No, we were in the Glenn Beck rally. We are one of those nut jobs you just referred to." Steve then calls Jody, his wife, over, a raven-haired, plump woman. I'm not being derogatory, just descriptive. And he tells us that she will get a kick out of meeting us, like we're some kind of a circus show. So as you might imagine, our conversation revealed a lot about the Washington, D.C. establishment. We listened as they attempted to stereotype us. Of course, their first argument that we were all racist was, well, they couldn't say anything because I'm staring right at them. Their second argument that we are homophobic was deflated when my wife revealed her adopted son was gay. And when those arguments didn't work, they accused us of trying to put religion into government and that they were firm believers of the separation of church and state. It was clear we weren't making any progress with the discussion. So my wife shifted tactics. She asked plump Jody, "Do you know how many people were at the rally?" Jody responded, "No." And with pride in her voice, Grasshopper stated emphatically, estimates are between 300 to 600,000 people were in attendance from all over the country. Jody shrugged her shoulders. So what? Who cares? So here's the bad news. The following day, we met for a brunch at another couple's home who live in the D.C. area. They knew why we had traveled to D.C., and after spending more than 2 hours with them, not once did they ask us about the rally. Not once. That same evening, we met with another longtime friend who lives in the D.C. area. And again, not once did she ask us about the rally. Not once. Finally, my wife spoke up and said that the rally was awesome. Our friend said nothing. So I chimed in and said, "I find it interesting that no one here in D.C. wants to talk about this rally. 500,000 people show up and no one mentions it." Our friend looked at us and said very matter-of-factly, "We have rallies here all the time. It's no big deal." So there you have it, America. The people in D.C. within the Beltway have grown tone deaf. It's not that they don't care. They're not even listening to we, the people, anymore. The elitists in Washington, D.C. live in an ivory tower, and the faint noises they hear from the outside is nothing more than a nuisance. We, the people, are insignificant. That night, in the hotel room, my wife cried. And as I went to sleep, I also cried. The next morning, my wife awoke, her spirit renewed. She said, "I'm glad that I now know. The people here in D.C. don't care about us. I now understand what we have to do. We have to put people here who listen to us and respond to us and who are above politics. People who will do the right thing for this nation, people who have honor. And we have to do it at the local, state, and federal levels. Ladies and gentlemen, our journey will be long, our struggle will be hard, but the rewards of giving future generations a real shot at freedom and liberty is paramount. That's our message back to you. A few weeks ago, I reread the Declaration of Independence while on a plane. As I was finishing the Declaration, I had a Glenn Beck moment as tears ran down my eyes. For one brief moment, I put myself in their shoes. Picture this. These men who were devoted to their country of origin had a number of grievances that were being ignored by their government. They had tried on many occasions to get these grievances addressed, and yet their king rebuffed them at every attempt. These men knew by signing the Declaration of Independence against the most powerful military nation on earth that for the remainders of their life, they would be deemed enemies and criminals of the state. They were, in effect, signing their own death warrant. And the only thing they could depend on was each other and their faith in God, all for the cause of liberty. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. Today I ask the question, are we prepared to do the same? In closing, I'd like to end with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. The words he spoke on November 19th, 1863 at Gettysburg are as true today for our America. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war, a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated far above our poor power to add or subtract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that in these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our challenge. Thank you.